Welcome to the Berea Podcast. This is Troy.
This is Della.
We're continuing our series from the 2008 Creative Work presentations that were at Native Bagel here in Berea. Last week we brought you Courtney Howard talking about social media. This week we want to share the presentation by Blair. Over the next 20 minutes, you'll hear her tell a little bit of her history before coming to Berea, her personal take on some of Berea politics, why she wanted to bring forth the First Friday concert series in Old Town Berea, and how it morphed into the past few years of being a grant recipient from the Levitt Amp Foundation. So sit back, relax, and listen to Blair.
Where to start? June 14th, 2008, I was at Bonnaroo, and Pearl Jam played a 3-hour set that night. They played an hour longer than their allotted time, and it was a pretty magical kind of moment in time that was just captured. I remember it being very aware of how magical it felt to be with so many people sharing that same experience, all singing the lyrics to these songs together, and looking up at the stars, and it was just a wonderful block of time. And I looked out into the crowd, and I saw this girl, this young lady who had a hula hoop. And she was spinning her hoop. And I had seen people at music festivals before this with hula hoops and didn't really pay them any mind. But this girl was completely blissed out. She was so caught in flow and in the moment, and so like channeling something larger than herself, and just in sync with this song and this music, that I remember just kind of stopping in my tracks. I don't know that I breathed. I felt like that was holding my breath. And at the end of it, I said, I want to learn how to do that. That she looked so at peace and so at home. And I needed that in my life. And so I was like, I want to go home and do that. Prior to this, I was in a couple of marriages that had domestic violence as part of them, that had addiction as part of them. And so that was kind of the background that I had come from. And this really was a moment in time where I chose another path for myself. And so that little plastic hula hoop actually became a really important tool for me to change the course of my life. And I started doing that everywhere that I went. I couldn't even keep it up for 30 seconds for several weeks, and I just started taking it with me, and it became like my new best friend. And at that moment, I had decided to leave my husband, my kid's father. I have 3 children, and this hula hoop actually really was kind of a tool for me to be able to transform my situation, to learn a lot of lessons that I needed to about forgiveness and about self-care and self-love. And, it seems a little silly, but it's been hugely impactful for my life. So at the same time that I was doing that, I was still going to music festivals, and I started finding a community of people through this shared experience of this love of this hula hoop, this flow toy that we all enjoyed. And started developing relationships with bands, started getting opportunities to perform, had since left my husband and was a single mom with 3 kids. My youngest daughter was 18 months when I left. And I left that situation and went on welfare and moved into subsidized housing, and kind of started $40 in my pocket, no car, no job, just kind of started from scratch. So I was doing work trade to be able to get into these festivals or getting performance opportunities, and ended up doing this kind of all over the Southeast. Many different festivals, people I was associated with who had circus, kind of Alterna Cirque troops in Columbia, South Carolina, and Asheville, and lots of cool opportunities, lots of really cool people. I think the thing that's really awesome about being at these arts and music festivals, these really cool events, is the sense of kind of radical self-expression and creativity and freedom to kind of be who and what you want to be in the moment, which we are often kind of stuffed in boxes in a lot of other places in our lives. And so I think that sense of that I got from being in these spaces, and then also the sense of community that develops. I was reflecting on that. I was at a music festival this last weekend with my food truck, first one of the year, and was really just kind of very conscious and aware of this little ecosystem that develops when you pop up like that and get a couple of thousand people together. All the food vendors were sharing hoses and electricity needs, and who has this will trade you an avocado for tortilla shells, and all of that kind of just happens, this sense of community and real kind of sense of family that develops in those little places, which was really important and kind of drew me in and resonated with me. So anyway, I started doing all those things, and then I blew out my knee, and it kind of really sent me into a spiral of a deep, dark depression for a little while, several months. And I was living in rural Cott County, Tennessee. It's the poorest county in East Tennessee. And knew that if I was going to take another step and change some more things, that I needed to relocate. And so I made that happen. I researched and tried to find specific programs because I had very little financial stability at the time, and researched and found this little-known program that I qualified for that would give me $1,000 to be able to try to make this move. And so I moved to outside of Knoxville so I could be closer to people I was performing with, I was friends with, and had kind of, as a single mother, had kind of found a bit of a village, other people with children to kind of help me. And so did that and continued to go to music festivals when I could, and performed and vended, and we taught classes. I had a hoop troupe that I had developed, put together, and we performed several places and got a really cool gig at Bonnaroo where we were teaching and performing there. And then I found my way to Rockcastle County, to Clear Creek Music Festival, and had maybe one of the most magical experiences in that weekend, the first weekend that I was there, because of the people that were gathered and how much heart there was, and how these people were doing really awesome, good social change work in the world too. And seeing all of that kind of combination together was really kind of life-changing. I took the way that felt, I took that back home and started adding that to my own community organizing work that I was doing in a little neighborhood center in Knoxville. And that was when we produced our first show, our first concert, house concert. And that actually was Rising Appalachia, who I had connections to Leah and Chloe, and through Clear Creek and Carrie and Bob there. And so they came down, we produced a show, we had so many people show up that we had to turn it into 2 sets, let everybody in this old Victorian house, and then at the end of the first set, they asked all those people to step outside and switch with the people who'd been outside. So it was hugely successful. And kind of, I think I got the bug then that's like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to gather people around music and the sense of community and really important conversations about our political landscape and social change and being a really relevant and important part of all of that as well. So I came back my second year to to Clear Creek, and that's where I met my partner, Brett Hetzel, who was from Jackson County, but he's been going to Berea school since he was in 6th grade. So he told me after we dated for about 8 months, he was like, Berea is a really great place to raise a family, and talked me into moving up here with my 3 children. And so we did, and that was almost 5 years ago now. And at that point, I had never attended a city council meeting. I didn't vote. Was not politically or civically engaged in that way at all. It was foreign to me. I was raised in a situation where we were politically neutral at all costs in the religion of my family, so it was really, really foreign to me. Got up here and quickly became involved with a group of people that were working to open a restaurant in the old Black Feather space down on Adams Street. And I was just going to work for the people who were going to do that, and then suddenly the conversation shifted to worker-owned cooperative. And that had actually been really of interest to me prior to moving here, and a big part of why I moved was not only because of Brett, but was managing a restaurant in Knoxville, and at the end of February, this horrible, tragic accident happened, and a car came crashing through our restaurant and ended up killing a patron. And that happened about 12 inches from my left shoulder, that this car came through and through 2 walls and split the wall. I was counting down the register. And so anyway, it was a really crazy freak kind of accident. And I remember having a couple of weeks of reflection on that and was like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And I was working about 50 hours a week, single mom, 3 kids, spending less and less time with my children to try to financially provide for my family, and was like, is this worth it to be living in this kind of way? And that really led, I think probably within about a month, I had made a decision that I was definitely going to move to Berea and was going to leave that behind. When that accident happened, the owner of the business came in, and her natural, I guess the shock of the situation was, everybody grab a broom and we're going to sweep things up and we'll sell food out the side door. And it was like, this was a crime scene, this was a really bad thing that had happened. And that completely shifted for myself my relationship to labor and productivity and work, and what I was willing to do for a paycheck, what I was willing to give of myself in order to get these green pieces of paper that we trade for things. And that really shifted things considerably for me. So I moved to Berea, got involved with this group of people who were opening this cooperative, and we were visited in February, after we had started this project, by Judy Sizemore. She is known around here as the Grant Whisperer, is how I've been introduced to Judy. She was working for the Tourism Commission. She was putting together a presentation about Old Town, and whether Old Town was on the decline, whether it was going to die, what was going to happen. There were so many empty storefronts 5 years ago down there, and the businesses are really, really struggling. And so when she came to visit us and ask about our restaurant project, she also had these statistics from the Festival of Learn Shop surveys at the end of that. And it showed that what people were interested in finding in Berea were things that we were interested in providing. So it was a really great affirmation that there was a problem that needed to be solved, and that hopefully we had a creative solution for that. And so not only did we talk about the restaurant and wanting to be able to pass alcohol sales in Berea and be able to use that as an economic driver and as a way to grow businesses, we also were talking about, well, if you're trying to get people to Old Town, you should throw a party. Like that's a great way to get people to come, is you give them music and you give them food, and then they come and they hang out. And if you're looking to increase foot traffic and activity and activate this area of town, why don't you do that? So Belle Jackson was the director of tourism at the time. She said, put together a proposal and I'll get you on the agenda. And I had never done anything like this before. I saw that they really liked PowerPoints. So put together a PowerPoint, but of course, when we got there to do this, they didn't have, their technology was too old for my computer, and I had not purchased the converter that I needed. So we weren't able to use the PowerPoint, so I just had to talk to them, which was really intimidating. She said, put together a proposal, ask for the Cadillac and be happy with a Buick. And I said, okay. So we walked in and we asked them for about $16,000 to do 6 events. City of Berea's fiscal year starts on July 1st. This was in, I think, March or April when I got on the agenda. The Tourism Commission, in the 2 or 3 months previous to this, had visited Wilmington, North Carolina, and a couple of other cities that I can't recall. They all had First Friday events. And we walked in the door not knowing this and pitched, hey, you should do a First Friday. We should pick one day of the month. We should say, hey, this is the time to come out, because that's what was going on in Knoxville. Gay Street, all of the art studios and galleries would open their doors. There was a lot of circus arts that were happening. There was a big drum circle in Crutch Park. The courtyard was all activated. That's what I was doing in Knoxville. That's where I was hanging out. That's when I saw people that would come in from 5 or 6 counties, because this was the night to come into town. So we said, hey, y'all should do that. And they were like, well, we were just thinking about a First Friday because we saw what was going on elsewhere and it was pretty cool, but we don't really have the capacity in our staffing situation to be able to do that kind of event. We don't even really know exactly kind of where to start with all of that. And when we look at hiring someone from out, I mean, it's a significant cost. So if you are saying that you want to do the work, and this is something that you're interested in, let's throw 3 months of funding at it, at the figures that you've given us, and we'll see how it goes. Come back in 3 months and we'll review. And they gave us a task to figure out how to make it sustainable, and how really they just wanted bodies in Old Town. So they had delayed this vote, I think, to discuss it and put it off, if I remember correctly. And they voted in April, and our first event was May. So we literally had 3 weeks from the time that they approved us to get funding for our first event. So the 2 months prior to this, I had booked, I think, maybe 5 of the months, tentatively. If we don't get this money, then this isn't going to happen. But these are people that I had connections to, people from within the central Kentucky festival scene, a whole lot to do with Jessa Turner. I went to Holler in the Holler my first year, I guess the last year of Holler, my first year in town, and met a lot of people there who love to play music, love to share their art, love to be part of building this kind of scene. And so between the people I knew in Knoxville and the people I'd met here in Kentucky, we were able to line up all of this music and just kind of gamble, really just kind of roll the dice on it. And 3 weeks, and we spent 0 money on marketing, maybe like $20 on sponsored posts on Facebook or something. But we got 400 people to come to Old Town for that first event. And previous to this, I had asked, because trying to figure out how to do an event like that in the city when there is no city event planner, there is nobody kind of taking that on, and there's really no written, this is who you have to see about a permit, and this is who you have to talk to about this, and this is what the insurance requirements are, and this is what it's like to work with the police department and public works. There was none of that. No one, it seemed like, really talked to each other, and it was hard to get questions answered. And so I immediately went in. I'd been involved in the Parks and Rec back in my hometown in Morristown, Tennessee. And they always had the EMS and the fire department and the police department and everybody out. So I was like, so what do we do? What do we need to do about blocking the streets and getting, them to be here? And it was just kind of like, oh, we don't block the streets and we don't do that. And halfway through that first event, Belle found me and she's like, so we're definitely blocking the streets next time. And so that really kind of shifted things, I think, from the way that I saw it, even from the way that the city was doing certain things, was just like, okay, and then you started developing more of a system and a process from that point forward. And so we were doing them once a month. The first year we did 6 events. Second year we did 6 events. Was happy with how everything went the first year. We actually got approached the second year by tourism and said, what does it take to produce this again, for you all to do this? Because we've been asked by the state why we aren't doing it, why it isn't an in-house program. And so, and we don't have the capacity, and we don't have the connection and the network and the ability to, negotiate price and all that kind of stuff. And so we asked for $20,000 plus in-kind support, of course. And they gave that to us, and we produced 6 more events. During all of this, we were also becoming very disruptive politically. There's a lot of the status quo and good old boy network and the way that things work, and there's a lot of very little transparency about processes and how things work at the government level here. And we became very disruptive. And as a result, we started getting a lot of pressure to stop doing what we were doing in a lot of different ways, both with the restaurant, both with First Friday. People started calling people to have them come down. Things shifted for us. We never had codes ever come down. All of a sudden, they started coming and, looking at everybody's looking for violations. The health department was called in. And, all of this kind of stuff was happening. And I think part of my background of not taking no for an answer and trying to find workarounds, and an obstacle gets in the way, well, you don't just give up. You dig under it or figure out around it or, whatever it is that you do. Smash through it, whatever. Get a few people, make a battering ram, whatever you got to do. I think that actually has played maybe one of my strongest entrepreneurial traits is my inability, relentless, which can be very off-putting to a lot of people as well. I am very driven and incredibly passionate, and so I don't turn those things off. I kind of am who I am with everybody, try to be. So the third year that we went in and we started making plans, tourism completely changed their tune. That was when Belle Jackson was leaving and Carrie Hensley was coming on as the director. And they said, we're going to shift how we are doing grant funding and what programs that we are supporting. And they reduced the funding. They also had purchased these buildings, some of the properties around town. They reduced their funding for grants and programs from $90,000 down to $28,000. And we were told straight up that because we had disrupted so much, there were political races that were already, alliances were being made, and certain promises had been made to secure votes that they would no longer give First Friday, Village Trough, or Blair money. And so those people kept those commitments and have voted no every time since then. And they're actually running for mayor now. So anyway, we so all the same time that the Spoonbread Festival stuff was happening, and they had made the decision to cancel that. And just because I'm incredibly spiteful, I was determined that they were not going to take First Friday Berea either. So we dug down really, really deep. A lot of artists and production people threw in, photographers, lots of people threw in to make sure that it happened, gave of their time and their energy, their resources, their finances. And we actually were able to get Rising Appalachia to come back. That was our largest show that we had ever had, and dug deep to make that happen. And they were incredibly kind, gave us a really, really great deal, wanted to come here, knew about the political landscape, and that definitely was part of their decision to be here. So we were able to make that happen. And I knew that at that point, if we were going to continue this, I needed to shift things internally for me to not be stuck in this spiteful fight that I had definitely become locked into. And that I needed to find outside funding to come in and make this thing happen. And so that's when I had basically, we'd shifted a lot of things in a lot of different ways. And I decided that we were going to apply for the Levitt grant. I had known about the grant since the first year that they had done it, but you have to have a lot of partnerships in place in order to make that happen. We weren't ready the first year, missed the deadline the second year. And so we had developed a relationship with the Arts Council. They had served as our fiscal sponsor for First Friday, and went to them and said, hey, let's apply for this grant. And Gwen said, well, I've already talked to Carry It Tourism about trying to do that, but they felt like that they didn't have the capacity to make all that happen. And so when I came, it was a perfect time because they had already been thinking about diversifying their arts offerings, moving into more performance arts and music. And so we were able to put all this together. I worked for a couple of months. I feel like I had about 50 meetings trying to talk to people about getting on board with this. We were able to run an online voting campaign to be able to get this and secured the first award last year. Did those 10 weeks, which was unbelievably difficult and way different than doing it once a month in ways that I had no way how to anticipate, but also like really synced up with the city. It was the first time that we sat down and we got all the department heads in a room together and we discussed everything that we needed to. And I walked away feeling like a colleague instead of like this inferior, you know, in some way, or that they were the, you know, whatever. And it was a huge shift for me, and also like to kind of really appreciate the work that we had done to try to respect their budgets and their staffing requirements, and to try to be as much of to cooperate with them and take on a lot of that logistical stuff ourselves, to not be a strain on them. And I think that was a really different situation than some of the other things that they deal with. And they, when I went in this year, when Gwen and I met with them and kind of did that same thing, and you look at, you know, the Chief Gregory, Chief of Police, and he was like, I have nothing, there's no feedback that we can give you all, you know, like that went off great. And that's a huge, you know, that's like a big, and there's a lot of people at play in this, but it also feels like a major accomplishment to get to that point where you feel that way, and you can make this thing happen, because it is a lot of moving parts and pieces. So we've done that again. We have deepened relationships with certain organizations and certain people, and we are really happy to be doing more music. And I think we've got a lot of things, you know, I definitely approach this with the programming part of trying to hit a lot of things. We have to be really diverse, so checking a lot of boxes. But there's a lot of behind the scenes about people who are doing socially conscious work, their lyrics, you know, all of that is a very real part of what we're doing. And I don't try to shy away from that at all, because, you know, we have lots of events here that are very similar and that draw certain types of crowds. And I think it's really important for there to be room made. Scoot a little elbow if you need to. Just make some room for other kinds of events and for people to gather in a different way. We don't need to be going outside of town to find that. We need to be able to have that here and be welcoming to anybody who wants to come and participate. So that's kind of how I've approached it, and I feel like I've been talking for forever now.
Great, thank you.
We presented Allie Blair's discussion this week because it's timely. I want to tell you a little bit about the Tate Sessions. The Tate Sessions showcase regional singer-songwriters performing in an intimate living room setting in the historic Tate Building that's at 444 Chestnut Street. The series is a collaboration of the Berea Arts Council, photographer Erica Chambers, and Allie Blair. The Tate Sessions welcome singer-songwriter, folk artist, and storyteller Abe Partridge on Thursday, February 21st. Now, his sound is a mixture of folk, roots, outlaw country, and punk. The music starts at 7:30. Now, this is what's important. There is limited seating available, and this is a ticketed event. So you can get those tickets over at BereaArtsCouncil.org, and more information can be found at the Tate Sessions on Facebook. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you next week.
Bye.